But I know personally, I wanted to know what it was like growing up on the Swanson Ranch and with Grandpa Mick and Grandma Betty. And,
It was fun.
yeah.
To me, it was fun. My brother, not so much.
So how was that dynamic different?
Well, I don't know. He and my dad just kind of clashed. So, but when we first lived there, my mom was from Tampico, my dad was from here, and my mom's mother did not like the situation at all.
Grandma Qualley?
Yeah. And so my mom had to sneak away because my dad was in the service at the time. She had to sneak. He was in, I think, Memphis, Tennessee. So she had to sneak out there, and they got married. And then when they moved home, they moved to the farm. And Grandma was just never happy about the deal.
So Grandma Betty went around Donna and Olaf's back and kind of got married without their knowledge?
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, because Grandma Qualley told her no, she couldn't do it.
So if he was in Tennessee, that means she snuck out to Tennessee to get married? Oh,
Memphis,
that would have been quite a trip.
It was, yeah. And she got married in a Navy dress because my dad was in the Navy. She didn't get a wedding dress like most people, so.
So that would have been right at the beginning of World War II then?
I don't know when it was. My brother was born in, I was born in 45 and he was born the year before.
Okay.
So, or 40, maybe he was born in 43, in January of 1943. So, it was quite a long while.
Yeah. So was Grandpa Magnus still deployed before when Mick was born?
Yeah. No, I think they were home by the time my Mick was born.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they were home by then. And he was out of the service.
Yeah, because that's the little bit that I've heard about Mick versus Magnus's relationship is that I think Mick got to spend some of the real early time, maybe a little bit more with Grandma and Grandpa Qualley, and that maybe created a little bit of a rift. That
Probably. Yeah.
Because
I don't know. I wasn't born yet then.
I don't know why I'm thinking. Did your mom ever pipe in on this?
Huh?
Did Grandma Betty have to live with Grandma Qualley for a while?
that was my understanding at the very beginning.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No. Grandpa Martin Swanson immigrated here from Sweden, and he ended up on the land that we ended up owning. And he bought the house he built the house that we lived in.
Oh.
Yeah. And it was a pretty nice house. It was 2 bedrooms downstairs, and then there was upstairs with 2 bedrooms, and it also had an attic.
So is that the same house that Mom and Heather and Russell would have grown up in, or is that a different house?
That would have been a different house.
Okay.
Probably. Yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha.
They lived a mile across.
Oh, okay.
The
So
field.
they're across.
They lived in that other house there. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But it was the same kind of a house.
Is it the house that Gausses have now?
Oh.
The house that who has?
Gausses now own it, but when Grandma and Grandpa were still out on the ranch, Magnus and Betty, Mick and Sharon lived in that white house.
Uh-huh.
Is that the one that your grandpa built, or is it the farmhouse?
The one that we lived in was the one Grandpa Magnus, or Martin Swanson built.
So the main farmhouse that is no longer there.
Where the big
Gotcha.
barn
Yeah.
was. And
Then Sharon and Mick eventually moved into it.
Okay.
yep, after Mick went to college and learned lots of stuff about farming. But my dad didn't like the stuff he learned. It was more expensive type farming than what my dad was used to. So they kind of didn't get along real well after that. So then my dad, when my mom passed away, my dad moved away, and I ended up with his house. And I didn't even know where my dad went. One day, I told him he could live with us, and we would just live there, and he
That's
could live
this
with us, and he did that for a while,
Oh well.
but
I did not
it
know
didn't
that.
last very long. I came home one day from work, and he was gone. Everything, his clothes were gone. He didn't even tell me he was leaving. I didn't know where he went.
I'd never heard that.
And so you're talking about this house.
Uh-uh.
It was this house because Grandma and Grandpa owned it. You bought it.
Right.
We moved in when I was in sophomore in high school,
Mm-hmm.
and Grandpa lived with us for the first year.
Oh.
But he didn't like my husband at the time, and I don't blame him.
Seems to be a lot of that in the family.
So she did what her mom did. She got married after she was told not to.
Ah.
And I shouldn't have. I should have listened to him, but once somebody tells me I can't do something, I'm kind of stubborn. Anyway, so Grandma and Granddad Swanson moved into town here, and my mom and dad ended up on the farm, and had us kids, me, my brother, and my sister, and I loved the farm. I loved the horses, and I had to actually get up before I went to school in the morning to milk the cow.
Oh.
Mick used to do it, my brother, but he got in trouble with my mom because one morning the cow kicked the bucket and he poured the rest of the milk over the cow's head. And so that was the end of his milking. So anyway, I had to end up milking the cow in the morning, and I also took care of the chickens, fed the chickens, gathered the eggs, cleaned the coop, and then I also had to milk the cow at night. So I had a lot of chores to do, but I liked it. I loved the farm.
Yeah. Do you remember what kind of milk cow was it? Was it like a black and white, like a Holstein, or was
No,
it like
it
a
was
Shorthorn, or?
It was a Hereford.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was
A
a
milking
Hereford.
Hereford.
Yeah. And I don't know why she kicked the bucket. She didn't kick the bucket for me when I milked her, but he must have did something wrong. He must have squeezed too hard or something. I don't know.
Yeah, us guys tend to be a little less patient.
Yeah,
So were all the beef cattle at that time Hereford as well?
yeah. Most of them. There was a few black ones. I think my dad ended up buying some black ones in the end, but we had a lot of cows.
Yeah.
A lot of cows.
So did you guys, I know Mom talked about it in her childhood, did you guys have summer pasture all the way up by Teeny then? Is that where the cows went?
Yeah, we had to chase them by horse. We chased them by horse every summer, or was it in the winter? No, one of the seasons we had to move them way up north,
Yeah.
and then they spent all that time up there.
That was probably a few day process to get it all the way up there, I can imagine.
Yeah, usually was a couple days, but we all of us kids loved doing it because we all get to ride horses and chase the cows and.
Yeah. So would one of the stops then be at the Quali place? Would they overnight there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We had a big open place there where they could spend the night and graze and.
Probably right around the homestead, I would guess.
Mm-hmm. Right, there was an old house there
No.
that Grandma Qualley lived in when my mom was growing up, and it wasn't.
Yep. Nope, I remember exploring that a little bit. It blew
Yeah.
down here, what, about 10 years ago?
10 years ago?
Yeah,
Really?
I think that's about it. It's still there. You can still see it, but it's all on the ground now.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep. It finally blew over. The one just north of it, I think, is still standing on the next property.
oh.
You-
When we used to go there, we'd go inside, and there was a stairway to go up to the upstairs, and there was old catalogs and stuff in there.
I got to see the catalogs because when it blew down, the attic stayed intact, so then you could get access to it.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah, no, I always enjoyed getting up there and looking at it and just seeing how everything was different.
yeah.
You might get a kick out of this. I have all of the old Hinsdale, Genevieve, Teeny phone company records.
Oh, do you?
Yep, and so Grandpa Olaf Qualley was a stockholder in it. He had stock. And as part of doing that, it gave you the right to have a phone.
Oh,
But
really?
you also had a monthly due just for owning stock because it was a co-op.
Oh,
He paid his due every year. But I'm pretty sure from all the records I looked at, he never had a phone charge. So he
got a
had
free
stock,
phone?
paid for it, never had a phone.
Oh, he didn't have a
No.
phone? Oh,
I don't think there's ever, I could be wrong. I'm assuming electricity and phone never went to that house.
really?
At least not an official phone line. But he must have thought that it was Because I mean, at that point, I think they probably were over at Tampico,
They might have been.
and I think that he bought into it just knowing how important it was for his neighbors and friends back home, just to make sure that the company was there. But I remember digging through that with Doris, and I'm just like, okay, here's this person's bill for the year and this person's bill for the year with all their long distance calls,
Really?
and then here's Olaf Qualley, and it's there's no phone charges; it's just his annual dues.
Oh, you just had to pay the dues, but no phone. Huh?
Yeah, because I don't think they ever hooked it up because I'm guessing no one was there by the time it went through.
That could be, yeah. They'd already probably moved to
Yeah.
down there. Huh.
Yeah, and I've spent some time going through the cemetery up there. I'm assuming that Olaf's
There's a cemetery up there?
Yeah.
I don't think I ever saw that.
Oh, you know the lane that goes, because you know there's the stuff on the east side of the road, and there's the stuff on the west side of the road, and there's what they call it, that Grandma Mogan Road that's on the south side, cutting between the two county roads.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side, right where that big tree is, between the Qualley Place and that government pasture, that little corner, there's a lane that goes all the way up, and on about halfway up there's a little cemetery there.
Really?
So that's where Albert is buried, which would be Olaf's brother.
Oh, he had a brother?
Yep, he got married in Great Falls early and then died of an illness not long after.
Really?
Yep, and I'm assuming that his dad is also buried there, but there's no marked stone that I can find.
Mm.
But the records say that he's buried there, and there's a couple spots with like some petrified wood and stuff that are obviously markers, but there's no names.
Really?
But his mother, I believe, was buried back in the Midwest.
Mm.
So we should have two Qualley relatives there, and then there's a few other people. There's
See,
some...
I didn't know that Grandpa Olaf had a brother here.
Yep.
Because he was from a different country.
Yeah, from my understanding, no, it would have been Olaf's brother, not Ole.
Okay.
So I believe they homesteaded, what was it, near Kindred or wherever, and they moved up here. But from what I read from the family history, Olaf did not come with them originally.
Oh, he didn't?
It was their parents and Albert, who was still like high school age, and they moved up there. And then they're to re-homestead, and then their dad died, and then Olaf came back to take care of his mom and his brother. His brother got old enough, got married, died.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I would assume that's when his mother decided that it was better just to go back.
So she left.
grew up. Yeah. So
Oh.
she's buried back. I've found her gravestone online. The really funny fact about that cemetery is actually a Civil War veteran buried in there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, they had preference on homesteading. Any time you spent in the service for the Civil War,
Mm-hmm.
you could put towards proving up on the land. So a lot of them moved out here and did that.
Wow.
But by the time that area was opened up in 1912, I think, they would have been older Civil War vets by that point. So, but no, I enjoy getting to go up there. I try and do that when I get a chance. Might be
Yeah.
only every 5 years, but just the country cemeteries are kind of a cool thing, and
Yeah.
the fact that those gravestones still look like you just put them there.
And I didn't even know there was a cemetery up there.
Yeah.
Never did see it.
Yep.
And we did a lot of traveling up there, but
Yeah, well, it would have been on the far side, so
yeah.
right around the perimeter fence. We'll have to
Yeah.
take you up there someday.
Yeah. That'd be fun.
Yeah. So, how much time did you get to spend in Tampico with Donna and Olaf?
We just once in a blue moon went and stayed with them, and I loved Grandpa Olaf. He was so nice, and he had a nice garage built, and he had it just neat and tidy. He had all of his tools hanging on the wall, and if you didn't put them back, you were in trouble.
Very particular, huh?
Yes, he was, but he was a good farmer. You know, he did beet farming, and he actually died out on the tractor. I think he had a heart attack.
Oh,
He didn't come in one day after, he was out there farming, so Grandma went to find him, and he was laying on the ground, deceased.
that's too bad.
Yeah. She was sad, very sad.
How old was he?
Oh, he had to have been in his 60s, I'd say.
That's not that old.
Mm.
No.
But there was quite an age gap between Grandma and Grandpa Qualley.
Was there?
I think there was almost a 20-year age gap.
Oh, that could be.
because I believe she was 18, 19 when they started being together, and he was more like 36 or older.
Really?
I'd have to go back and look. And that's something that always kind of I wondered about personally was, okay, was that a marriage of convenience or what was that? Well, I actually have an answer, which I didn't think I ever was going to have. When right before I was born, my mom got a baby book. There's a section in there to have your grandparents fill it out. And she handed it over to Grandma Qualley just to have her, fill in like her and oath. She wrote notes throughout the whole book. And that's one of the things she wrote on was, no, it was love at first sight. Because he was working, I believe he was working at Hinsdale Mercantile.
Really?
And then she started working there at, I believe, as a bookkeeper at like 18. Said it was true love the first time they met. And that made me real happy to sit there and look at that. Because sometimes you look at those age gaps and you go, why?
Was he a lot older than her then?
Yep, I think it was well over a decade.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. I'd have to go back and look at the exact, but that's why, I mean, he died in his 60s and she was a widow for almost 50 years. So how was that with Grandma, with Grandpa gone? Because I believe after that she actually went back to college, didn't she?
She did. When she was 50 years old, her and my brother were in college together. Yeah. And she loved college, and she became whatever she became, I can't remember what it was. County Extension agent?
Yeah, in the 4-H.
And then she moved to Conrad, and she was the county extension agent there for many years. She had I was going to school in Great Falls at the time, so I wasn't too far from her. So she'd come get me and take me back to her house, and I'd spend the night with her, and she'd show me around town and stuff. And she loved it there. But after a while, especially after my sister's house exploded, she knew she needed to come back home because Jimmy was in the hospital and he was going to be there for a long while. And none of us really had time to just go and sit with him at the hospital. So she moved home and sold her house and moved into that apartment that she moved into. And she stayed with Jimmy every single day.
So she was in that one apartment in Glasgow that whole time? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and she spent every day at the hospital with Jimmy, and that was for like 3 months, I think she did that. Yeah, he was bad because his legs were both broke right here, and he had to have them up in the air like this, and so he couldn't even get out of bed, poor kid.
No.
But he healed up, and he's good now.
I've heard bits and pieces of that story, and I always consider it a personal achievement, I guess, that I actually knew Grandma Qualley, and I remember my great-great-grandmother, and I always thought that was cool.
Yeah, Grandma Qualley was a very good lady. Very good. But
yeah, so tell me a bit about your sister. I don't have many people talk about her very much.
my sister?
Yeah.
Well, she was 7 years younger than me. I was 7 when she was born. And the night she was born, my dad came home and told my brother and I we had a new sister. And I was so happy and my brother was so mad. He wanted a brother, but he didn't get it. But after that, my sister was little, and I did a lot of taking care of her as a baby because I was older. And then she decided when she graduated from high school, she was going to Denver, Colorado to go to some business school, which she did, and then that's how she met Jim. And then he came back home with her when she was done. They ended up getting married and had Jimmy and Jess.
And Marissa.
And what?
And Marissa,
Marissa?
the
Where's
baby.
Where's Marissa? No.
She was in the house explosion.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So then when my sister's house exploded, she was gone and so was her little girl. But everybody else was okay.
How did the house explode?
Well, what happened was they were all, actually Tyler was supposed to be there too, but he was the little boy and my mom was babysitting him. He was only like 15 months old. I was working, so my mom babysitting that day, and he happened to fall asleep when she was supposed to be going out there. So she didn't go, thank God. And they were gonna, what they were doing is they were gonna brand some calves. Well, Patty's house had just been redone, and the guy that redid it didn't plug the hole for the propane into the basement.
Oh.
So when they turned the propane on, it all went into the basement, and the water heater was down there. And when that ignited, the whole house just blew up. And Jimmy was, they were all sitting around the kitchen table, and that's why I think his legs got broke right here. And he ended up in the basement right beside the hot water heater. And the hot water was hot.
Oh.
Yeah. And nobody knew it at the time, but when the ambulance finally got out there and nobody could find Jimmy, I found Jimmy and helped him out of the basement with another help from another band that was there, because he was in pain, real pain. And I knew my sister probably wasn't long for the world because she was gurgling. My dad had nothing wrong but a little cut on his arm. And Jim had a broken neck, Jim Sanderson, Patty's husband. And the little girl, nobody could find her either, but she was in one of these little chairs like this, sitting eating, you know, and it just went sailing, and they found her out in the barnyard, but she was gone. So, sad, sad day.
Mm.
When my mother called me, I was at work, and she said, Cheryl, you have to come home. Patty's house just exploded. And I said, oh, it did not. And she said, yes, it did. So I ran home as fast as I could. And I wanted to go because I wanted to see what was going on. So we've had to find somebody to watch Tyler because he was sleeping. And then we ran around town and got all the nurses that were in town. And a lot of them didn't want to go. But I said, you got to come. We need you. And so they did. They all came. But the ambulances got there and they took off for Glasgow once they got everybody loaded up. That was it.
So how did that affect you and your family long term?
Well, made me very sad. I guess my mom was probably the worst one because she lost her daughter and a little baby, so it was really sad. But I spent all my time that night that we all went to the hospital, I stayed in the room with Jimmy and Jess. And Jess was fine. All he had was a cut right here. He was probably 3 years old at the time. He didn't have anything wrong with it, but I stayed with him anyway because he was scared. And Jimmy was in the bed laying there, and he kept, all night long, he kept crying and crying and crying. And I said, what's wrong, Jimmy? And he'd go like this, you know. And so I called the nurse in and I said, he's got something wrong with him. He's crying all night and something hurts him really bad. So they turned him over and he had burn blisters on his backside from the water that he had sat in. So that was really sad. But then after that, they had to put his legs up in a kind of like a harness type thing that they were like that. And so he couldn't even get out of bed. So, but he was a good little boy. He didn't cry. But I think by that time his butt was better. It didn't burn as bad because they fixed it. But he grew up and became a cop. And then he ended up being the head of the cops.
Yeah.
So I think he's retired now.
Mm.
I'm not positive.
Yeah.
So where did the boys go after their mom died?
Where did what go?
Where did they go?
Sanderson.
They didn't finish their childhood here, didn't their dad and them move away?
Oh, no, they stayed here.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, they stayed here.
No, they stayed with Grandma Betty for a while, and then Jim married the nurse from the hospital, Darlene,
Oh, that's right,
and
yeah.
they moved to Miles City.
Yeah, that's right.
Gotcha.
They did move to Bell City, because that's where she was from. And so I guess she went back there and got a job in Miles City. But yeah, they did end up getting married. But then after that, Jim became for hockey, he was a referee for the hockey. And one night in a hockey game, he fell down and he passed away. He had a heart attack right there on the floor. So it was the end of him. Anyway.
What was your mother like?
My mother?
Mm-hmm.
Well, she ended up with pancreatic cancer, and mostly because she smoked all of her life. And she was a good cook, very good cook. But when she passed away from pancreatic cancer, my dad took off. He lived in this house, and we lived with him, and one day I came home and he was gone, lock, stock, and barrel, and never told me where he was going. Well, I ended up finding out. Somebody told me, but I don't know who told me, I can't remember, but he had moved to Malta. Got himself an apartment there and moved to Malta, and he didn't live there a real long time. Then he moved to Glasgow. When I went to see him in Malta one day, he was gone.
Wasn't a great communicator, huh?
Yeah, he was not. And my dad and I got along well. We did really get along well, but he just was on his own. But, so then I found him in Glasgow, and he was with another woman. He was with a woman in Malta, but that didn't pan out, so he moved to Glasgow, and he ended up with Nell Hetrick. And they ended up getting married. He didn't tell me that either. He just took off and went, and they got married and came back, and then what happened? Somebody's house blew up. Whose was it?
No, that was Patty's before, the one we just...
Huh?
Are you talking about Patty's that we talked about?
No.
Someone in Glasgow?
Well, he was with Nell Hetrick, and in her house didn't, because it's still there. I don't know what happened. Oh, she died. That's what happened. She went for a bicycle ride out on the highway towards Tampico and had an aneurysm.
Oh.
And she died right there on the highway. So that made him sad. So then he kind of just lived in a little shack by himself for a while. Then pretty soon he was gone. He'd moved to Glasgow. I mean, he had a nice apartment there, but yeah.
Yeah. So what were your grandparents on Swanson's side like? So what were Magnus's parents like?
Oh, Grandma Swanson and Granddad? Yeah. Grandma Swanson was wonderful. She was a wonderful lady. And of course Martin was from Sweden, so he was really quiet. When they moved off the farm, they moved into that little house in town. Did you ever go there?
I don't think so.
No, probably not. But he would just sit in his rocking chair, a wooden rocking chair, all day long and listen to the radio. While he'd get up and go outside and walk around town and come back. But that's what he did all day long. He didn't associate with anybody. Then they had this big cellar door in their back porch. And somehow or other he fell down that cellar door, got hurt. And so she had to get him to the hospital. So he spent some time in the hospital. And he ended up passing away. So she was by herself. So then she moved to where Doodad is now. What's that called?
Niemont Manor.
She moved to Niemont Manor, to a little apartment there, and she loved it there. But
did any of your grandparents speak language from the old country? Norwegian or Swedish or anything?
no, not that I know of. Grandma Swanson's.
What about Granddad? Wasn't he hard to understand? Granddad?
He just wasn't very talkative. He was kind of quiet.
I vaguely remember him, but I did know him, and I was thinking he still had a pretty heavy accent or something.
He probably did. And Heidi thought that he brought a brother with him, but I never ever heard about a brother. He never ever associated with any other brothers after he got here that I know of. And he met Grandma Swanson because she was a Whittaker, and they had moved here, and homesteaded just across the road from where Granddad Swanson was. And they ended up getting married and had my dad and Uncle Ed. And I don't know.
Yeah. So do you remember Grandpa John McCauley then as well?
Oh yeah. Yeah. He was a good guy. I like Grandpa Qualley. Or Macaulay.
So so what I'm hearing is the best grandparents were Qualley and Macaulay.
Yeah. Yeah. Grandpa John was always a nice man. Nice man. And Grandma Grace, she ended up with cancer, so she died early. I ended up living in their house, that house over there. And I ended up with it. And then I sold it to Gary Hillman. And then I don't know what he did with it. I guess he rented it out. He
No,
doesn't
he
live
still
there.
lives there.
Huh?
He still lives there.
Does he live there? Okay.
So what was school like? Did you do all your school in Hinsdale, or were they still doing some country schooling out?
Yeah, when I started, we had it was called Swanson Cooley School. It was 2 miles from where we lived. So we'd either ride our bikes to school, or one day I rode my horse to school.
Oh.
And the poor horse had to stand there all day. But it didn't mind it too bad. I hopped on it and rode it back home. I loved my horse. That was the best part of the country life. But
Yeah. What was your horse's name?
oh, we had several, but that one was probably Sea Star. Yeah, we had a Red. My dad's horse's name was Red, and I think my horse's name was Sea Star. And we had one named Nip, but we had probably like 5 or 6 horses.
I remember Ginger. Remember Ginger?
Ginger.
And it might have been Mick's horse. It was once Mick had the farm. Ginger, when we were little kids, seemed like the biggest horse you've ever seen. I mean, it just seemed like a giant horse. I think it was a pretty big horse, but as a kid, it just seemed like a huge horse. But she knew how to move cows, and so when we were little, we would go along and help move cows, and they'd put any of us unexperienced riders on Ginger, and all you had to do was hang on. If a calf got away, she'd take after it. So you just had to hang on.
Pretty rare horse.
Well,
Yeah.
remember when we were chasing cows up north? All of us were on horses, and you kids were all on horses, and Tyler was just like 3 or 4 years old. And you kids started monkeying around, and his horse threw him off.
Did he break his arm or something?
Yeah, broke his arm, and I had to take him to Glasgow in an old wrecked up pickup that my dad had. It was and I drove all the way to Glasgow from up north to find out that he had to have a cast on. So he cried all the way. I mean, he's only 4 years old, and it hurt.
And I can't imagine the cars were very smooth back then either. It probably jostled quite a bit.
Not in that old. It was just his old pickup that he used to take gas to his tractor and stuff, you know. I don't know why we had that with us, but we did. But,
Yeah. So that old Swanson schoolhouse, did they eventually move that building?
yeah, Sharon moved into it.
Okay.
I mean, they moved it down to,
I was going to say, I think that was the first house I lived in. I always thought that was
yeah.
kind of cool that I lived in the house because you and Grandpa Mick, and I'm assuming Magnus probably went to school there.
No, I don't
No?
think he did. I'm not sure, though. I just know they called it the Swanson Cooley School, and it was kind of up on a hill, and it was like 2 miles from where we lived. So we either walked there, or my dad would give us a ride in the morning, or and then they'd come and get us at night, but sometimes they'd forget to come get us. And we'd start walking. I remember one time Uncle Ed was supposed to come get us, and he forgot. and it was really cold out, and so we were all just frozen. Our cheeks had, you know how they,
Mhm.
and so Uncle Ed said, take this snow and rub it on your cheek, and that made it worse.
How did they heat the school?
They had a furnace in there. Yeah, there was a basement. The teacher lived in it, and she would cook us lunch. She'd usually cook us a bunch of soup, and we'd bring sandwiches or whatever, and we'd go downstairs and eat our lunch, and then she would clean up the mess and come back up, and she'd teach us the rest of the day. And
How many kids were in school?
okay, there was the Eatons, that would be Doc and Mike, and then the Cameron girls, that was probably Elaine, Joan, and Teddy, us three. Me and my brother, and then Connie and Yvonne and the boys, John and Mark. No, John and Jeff. I don't know that Mark went to school there, because he was younger.
Mm.
Yeah.
So then did you do all the way through 8th grade then, or did they eventually start shipping you guys into town?
We went to school when I was in the 6th grade.
So at that point the Swanson schoolhouse wasn't used anymore?
That's right. No, it wasn't used anymore. And then when Sharon, I don't know, she was down, I think it was my brother was gone by that time. And she wanted a place to live, and she was going with Kelton Melby at the time. So they moved that Swanson Cooley School down to where it's at right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I knew they had moved it. I didn't know when it was that late.
Yeah.
Huh. It's a cool little house. I like it.
Did they put a basement under it?
There's a basement under it, yeah.
Is there?
Yeah. And then the upstairs is pretty well furnished as well, so.
Is it?
Yeah.
Because it was all just one big room upstairs when I went to school there. Wood floors and...
No, I always enjoyed that house.
Huh, I don't think I was ever in it after it became a house.
Yeah.
Huh.
So what was your favorite subject in school?
My favorite subject?
Or least favorite?
Huh?
Or what was the least favorite?
Oh, I liked any of them. I guess I did well in school. Except we did have that one teacher that I didn't like very much, Ray Carey. If we did something bad, he'd come by our desk and say, "Put your hand out," and he'd take the ruler and go slap our hand.
You can't get away with that anymore.
No, I don't suppose.
So how different was it going from the country school and coming into town?
For me, it was really scary because I was a really shy person when I was a kid. And so I was in the 6th grade and I got good grades, and we had a really old teacher. But when I got into high school, they had me work in the office, the school office, and I don't know why they had me do that, dude. But George Gaynor was the superintendent at that time, and he picked me I had to go check everybody off at lunchtime and do all that kind of stuff, you know. So I did that a lot.
So was that all in the old 2-story school then?
Huh?
Was that all in the old 2-story school?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was that school like? How was, where were the classes? Where'd you eat lunch?
Well, there was a big lunchroom, and then we went upstairs to school, and each different class had a different room to go to. There was a big study hall that if you weren't in a class at the time, you went to the study hall. But every class had its own little room, and a different teacher for each type of class. There was a lot of teachers then.
Were they mostly male teachers at that point?
No, there was both boys and girls teachers, yeah.
Pretty well split, 50-50, or?
Probably. I know Reen Locke was a teacher. She was an English teacher.
I've had several people talk a lot about Locke.
Have you?
Yeah, I think that she was pretty memorable for a lot of people.
Oh, I suppose. I liked her. She was a good teacher, but
Yeah.
But there was both men and women teachers, but she was the one woman I remember. Other than that, I think most of them were men, coaches and.
What were the school events like? You know, basketball games, dances, concerts. What all was going on at the school?
Well, they had that gym that was, you had to walk down into it. And that's where my brother played basketball. But we were all up above the floor because the bleachers were up above and the floor was down there. And I was a cheerleader at that time. I think I was a cheerleader every year of high school.
Was that the period when girls weren't allowed in sports?
Yeah, we couldn't participate in basketball. Never could. We did it in PE just for fun, but we just did the half court type basketball. Wasn't like a real basketball game, and we just did it for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Rain Locke was the teacher at that time for PE, and she wanted us to do it, so that's why we did it. But you could only go half of the court. You couldn't go all the way through, which wasn't very fun. But
Yeah. So how was that then? You know, when I'm assuming you played basketball and your daughter was very good at it, and your daughter, your granddaughters, how was that getting to watch them do sports when that was something that you were denied?
it was nice to be able to watch them do that. I don't know why they didn't let girls do it back when I was in school. I don't know. They never had let girls play basketball. So, I don't know.
Well, let's see, you got granddaughters that have done basketball, track, volleyball, softball. What's your favorite to watch?
For my granddaughter,
Mm-hmm.
I love to watch her play softball because she's really good at it. But she's a good basketball player too. So I like all of them.
How is it now that we have to co-op with other schools? You know, Seiko used to be a pretty good rivalry, and now we're playing on the same team as them. How is that for you getting to watch that transition?
Oh, it's fun. I like it. Yeah, because they're a good team right now.
Yeah.
They got more players, so they're good.
Mm-hmm. So did you get to do any of the other youth activities? Was there Girl Scouts still at that point? 4-H?
No, I didn't do any of that.
Was a lot of that because you lived out of town?
Probably. Yeah, I did all my stuff on the farm with the horses and the chickens and the cows.
So was there a bit of a difference then between you and the kids that lived in town? Were they kind of cliquey, or did you able to make friends well?
They were friendly. They were real friendly to me. I got real close with most of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Who were your best friends growing up?
My best friends. Well, Judy Koski was one, Carol Schuler was one, and Connie Reynolds, and my cousin Connie Fay. They were all the best friends.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did life on the farm change over the years? Because I know when you were real little, I mean, versus just 10 years later, I'm sure that tractors and electricity and all that, there started to be a lot more things that you could do with it. How did that change for your dad and your brother?
Well, I loved being with my dad on the farm, and I was like 12 years old, and I was just a skinny little runt. One day he decided this farmer, one of our neighbors, needed to have his wheat combined. And he didn't even ask the guy. He just hopped in the combine and went. And I said, "Oh, I want to go with you." So I went with him. And he got his couple rounds, and then his hopper was full of grain. He says, "Oh, I don't have any place to dump my grain." He said, "Cheryl, go up to Uncle Ed's, run up that hill and go up to Uncle Ed's and get that truck that's in his yard." So I did. I'd never driven a thing in my life. I get up, there's no keys in it. So I go knock on Uncle Ed's door and I say, Uncle Ed, my dad's over there combining and he's got to dump his grain and he wants me to take this truck and there's no keys in it. And can you show me how to drive it? And he did. He showed me how to drive it. I drove it down the hill, went into that field, drove it right up to the combine, and he dumped. I can't believe I did that. Because I couldn't even hardly see over the steering wheel.
You grew up a little different on a farm, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you gotta be tough.
So, when you had to go move cows, obviously they were summered a lot farther away from the house. How did you get the horses to the cows?
We rode them. Yeah.
So then did someone pick you up and take you home at night because that was a multi-leg journey, or did you camp out?
No, we stayed. We came home. We always put them in a field, the cows, and the horses too. And then we'd all get in the vehicle and drive back home, and then we'd go back up the next day and start all over.
So Swanson's was one of the big historical ranches in the area. What were some of the other big guys that were doing cattle?
In the area?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Gordon McLaughlin hardly had any cows. And the Halversons up the road, I don't think they did either. We probably had the most cows in the whole area. Yeah.
How did you go about feeding them in the winter?
Oh, that was the fun part. My dad had a team of horses, and he had a sleigh, a wooden sleigh built, and so he'd hook the horses up, and he'd make me go with him, and he'd say, "Okay, Cheryl, let's go feed the cows." So he'd get me up on that sled, and he'd put me between his legs at the front of the sled because there was a bar there, and I wouldn't fall off. It's the only part of the sled that had a side on it. And so we'd go out in the snow, and it was a sled trailer type thing. So he'd put like 3 or 4 bales on it, and we'd get out there where the cows were, and oh God, they knew what was going on. They wanted their food. So he'd stop the sled, and he'd cut the twine on the hay, and he said, "Okay, you throw that off to the cows." And oh boy, did they follow us. If I would have fallen off of that sled, I would have been dead. I would have, because those cows would have trampled me to death.
And they were all just the little square bales, I'm guessing?
Well, we had the long bales like this that were about this wide. And so I'd just take off the hay and throw it out as we go. And the cows were right there. Boy, when they saw that sled coming, they were right there. They came running.
If there was one thing growing up in the country and running cows as a kid, what's one thing from today that you wish you had back then to have made that easier?
I don't know.
Well, let me flip it on its head. What's one thing from your childhood you wish was still around?
That I wish was still around? My horse. My horse was my buddy. My horse. I did love my horse.
So, was the telephone on the party lines back then?
Yeah, it was the kind that you hook on your wall and you pick the thing up and go like this, and then you had to speak to something that's on the phone. And you could listen to all sorts of conversations, and people wouldn't even know you were doing it.
Did you do that a few times as a kid?
Oh yeah. When my mom was gone, I did that. Could hear a lot of conversations that I shouldn't have.
Mm-hmm. Did you guys have a radio in the house?
Mm-hmm. I didn't know how to run it though. And we did have a TV. And I had a few shows that I really liked watching. And I usually watched the show instead of doing my homework.
What were holidays like?
Holidays?
Mm-hmm.
We usually had our holidays at home, just us. We always had Christmas. Remember one Christmas, it was just us, just me and my brother and sister and mom and dad. And when we woke up the next morning, there was presents under the tree, but I had no present. they left a saddle. My dad bought a saddle. Supposedly, I guess it was my brother's. I don't know. I just became really quiet the rest of the day. My mom said, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "I didn't get a present." She said, "Oh shit, I forgot." she had bought me suitcases because it was about time for me to have to go off to college, and she forgot to give them to me. So I ended up with a present.
Yeah. What was college like, going from a small town where you know everyone to?
Well, I went to a commercial college that was just a 1-year school, and there was all sorts of kids there that I did know, because there was a lot of kids from this area that went there. And I ended up living with a family because the family would house the kid, and then I was supposed to help at the house, like clean house, cook meals, clean dishes, do that type of thing. Because the lady whose house I stayed at, she never got out of bed, ever.
Oh.
She was an older lady, and she wouldn't get out of bed at all. So I did everything for her husband.
Was
and
that
he drives me to school. He would drive me to school every day and come get me. It was nice.
Was that a more common thing for, people ended up being at home and someone had to take care of them if they were unwell or unable to take care of themselves?
And he couldn't take care of her, and I didn't have to take care of her because she never got out of bed. But she would get mad at me for things that I didn't, like pick up something or I left something laying around. She would get mad at me for that, because I guess she must have got up after I went to school, but I never saw her up and around ever. And then after I left, she ended up passing away. So I think she was pretty sick when I was there, and she just couldn't get up and move around.
So what was life like after college?
After college, I came back home, and I went to work in Glasgow, so I drive back and forth, and I can't remember what job that was I had, but it was right near the same area around the corners where I ended up working at United Insurance, and it wasn't really insurance, but I was like the secretary there. It was just with one single guy was in there, but that didn't last very long. Ended up getting a job in Hinsdale at the bank, and so I didn't have to drive back and forth. But
So after Grandpa Mick gave up teaching ag ed, or vocational education, I guess it would have been at that time, and he came back to the farm, what was the dynamic like with him and Grandpa Magnus?
at that time it was okay. He lived in that house. Did you live in that house with him? No. She was like a mile away from our house. It was the one that Uncle Ed had lived in. So he was gone to, he had moved to Glasgow by that time and started running the farm equipment sales. So Mick and Sharon moved in there, and I think they had Heather by that time. And it was okay at that time. But it was later on when my brother started getting bigger ideas that he thought they should do, and my dad was kind of a tightwad. He didn't want to spend a bunch of money.
Yeah, I remember Mom talking about Grandpa Mick was trying to be kind of innovative, because I think he was trying to AI cattle at that time. That was pretty early on for Montana and the beef world.
Yeah, but he learned all that stuff in college, and so he wanted to put it to use. But my dad wouldn't have nothing to do with it.
Yeah. No, I know my mom spoke very highly of her childhood of trailing the cows up north by the Teeny. I think she said the Grable place.
Yeah, probably.
Up there,
yeah.
and they would stay up there and breed the cows. That was a big part of her childhood, so that's kind of cool to see that.
Yeah.
That was a big part of your childhood as well, going up there.
Yeah.
So what was it like when Mick died?
Oh, it was sad, because nobody even knew what happened to him. hired man found him when he came to work, and he would be getting up in the middle of the night to go check on the heifers that were calving. And for some reason, Sharon didn't realize he didn't ever come back in the house. And so I don't know, none of us ever really knew what happened to him. If the cow got him, or if he could have had a heart attack, at that age.
Yeah. What I was told is that he got kicked in the head.
But he didn't have a mark on him.
Well, that's, from what I was told, that messed with grandmother. Because from what I was told is they fixed him up that much at the funeral home.
Oh, really?
What I've been told is that they didn't let Sharon go out once they realized he had passed. And that she really wanted to go see him, to let it sink in and make it real. And she didn't get to see him until the funeral. And at that point, from what I understood, they had fixed everything.
Oh.
And I think that messed with her for a lot of years, going, well, if he looks that perfect, why is he dead?
Yeah, true.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what I have heard.
I remember hearing that he got kicked in the head too. I mean, that's what I've always believed.
Yeah.
You've always thought he got kicked in the
Yeah,
head?
that's what I thought was the...
Did you ever see him?
No, I never saw him, but from the get-go, that's what we were told.
Yeah, and I mean, that makes sense if he was checking heifers at night. You bend down to pick a chain or you're pulling, you're in that position.
Yeah.
So, I know I hear bits and pieces. How did that affect Sharon and Heather and Russell and Heidi?
Well, at the time, Heidi was off she was a girls' date or something.
Yeah.
So Sharon asked me if I would ride with their pilot to go get her. And she was fine all the way home. I thought maybe she'd be sick in the airplane, but she seemed fine.
That's funny because she really does not like small planes.
No, and I was sitting in the front and she was sitting in the back, and she had to be brought up to the airport, and then we just barely got there and she was there, so we just head right back home. But I didn't hear much words from her at all the way home. But I know she was sad, very sad. But
yeah, I know you and Sharon were pretty good sister-in-laws. How did that dynamic with her and your father go? Because I don't believe that, well, you said that Mick and Magnus kind of had a strained relationship.
yeah.
I'm assuming that kind of translated over to Sharon.
Well, Sharon kind of wanted to stay on the farm, and my dad wouldn't let her because he didn't think she could take care of things, which I would have helped her in a heartbeat, but I wasn't asked to do anything. So I just kind of stayed out of it. But then, did Kelton take over the farm? Who did?
Jeff.
Jeff Swanson? Okay. So, see, Jeff was always my dad's favorite. Always. As a little boy, Jeff loved the farm. He would, if he was anywhere near a tractor, he'd hop up on the tractor and pretend like he was driving when he was just a little guy. And so my dad loved that part about Jeff. And Jeff and my dad did get along well.
Yeah.
But
So then Sharon and the kids moved to town,
yeah.
and then it wasn't many years later that Russell passed.
Right. And I think Russell's problem was he'd what is that thing that he was sick with something that causes problems with you.
I was told it was an unknown heart condition. I don't believe they ever
Yeah, there
fully
was
diagnosed what it
Marfan
was.
syndrome was thrown around. There was lots of different heart
He had
syndromes.
some disease though, and she didn't really take him to the doctor, and he played basketball the whole season. And he'd be out there on the middle of the floor, and all of a sudden he'd stop and he'd like wonder what, he wouldn't know where to go or what to do.
Oh, so there were maybe a few symptoms beforehand?
Yeah, I think so, and I think she should have taken him to the doctor, but she didn't. I don't know why she didn't, but I know who was it that got married in the backyard? Was it Heidi? And Russell was here in,
Because that was within...
Yeah, Heidi was on her honeymoon.
That was just like within a week or so,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Heidi and Mark had to come home from their honeymoon, I think.
Oh, but he was up here, everybody was out there getting chairs and all that kind of stuff, and Russell was up here watching them out the window, and I said, "Don't you want to go help him, Russell?" He said, "No, I'm too tired." He didn't want to go out. So I know that he wasn't feeling well at that time.
So how did you and your kids handle that? Because I know that you guys went to school with them, and I believe it was in the middle of band class, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Him and Tyler were only a couple years apart and really good friends, so it really affected Tyler. I was already married with children of my own. I was in Glasgow when it happened, so I didn't, that's before cell phones, so I didn't, well, at least I didn't have cell phone. I didn't know until I got home and I had a message on my answering machine.
I was working at the United Insurance at the time too, and somebody called me, wanted to know where Sharon was. And I knew where she was because she was down in Glasgow that day doing something with, but I didn't know how to get a hold of her. And somehow or other they figured out how to get a hold of her and told her what was going on. And of course by the time she got to the hospital, Russell was gone.
Well, I think he was gone before they got out of the school.
Huh?
I think he was gone before they even got him out of the school.
Oh, was he? Oh.
I think it was pretty sudden. He just collapsed in bed. At first the kids thought he was messing around, and
I've heard that
Yeah.
part. That
But he was kind of gurgling, wasn't he?
they started CPR on him at the school, I believe.
They what?
They started CPR on him, I think, at the school.
Oh.
But anyway, yeah, it was pretty traumatic for those kids that had to
Yeah.
witness it, I think.
Yeah, it would
I
be.
did not intend for this to be so much about death.
No, that's all right. That's what our family's about, right?
Well, I wasn't gonna say this on camera, but I guess I'll just say it. My mom's always been big about pictures. I think she got that probably from Grandma Qualley.
Mhm.
But we always have a lot of pictures on our walls, and some of them are people I've never met.
Right.
But one picture frame that always stood out to me is it was a picture frame and it had 3x3 pictures in it. It was all 3 sets of cousins. So it was the Hillmans, the Swansons, and then Jimmy and them. And the fact that one kid out of each family passed, it was.
So, I don't consider myself superstitious, but when I got married, and even before I got married, my plan was always, I'm having 2 kids. Because our family can't have more than 2 kids. So I'm kind of, and that's where I drew the line. 2 kids and that's it.
Well, I don't know why, but it always draws me back to Grandma Qualley when I think about that, because I put that in perspective of her life. Of she lost her daughter, she lost her husband, she lost 3 of her. She lost 2 of her grandkids, 3 of her great grandkids, and how strong a woman and how much of a matriarch and how much she held the family together for so long spoke very loud to me.
I've always been very, I don't remember how you worded it, but I don't know if it's proud or whatever, not proud, but I guess honored that as a kid I got to know my great-grandparents, my grandparents on both sides of the family. They were all still alive, and then my kids and you kids got to have a great, and it's like, that's amazing, because a lot of kids don't even know their grandparents.
And me and your kids, Derek and Kendra, actually remember her
Right.
and had memories with her.
And have pictures and everything.
And then I have, Trey doesn't even necessarily have real memories of his grandparents, at least not the way I would have them.
Right.
So it's definitely interesting.
Yeah.
I'm still amazed that she was driving. Because I remember her driving to my birthday party and going, even at that age, of should you be driving in your 90s?
Who was it?
Grandma Qualley.
Your grandma.
Oh, Grandma Qualley. Yeah, I was scared. I used to be scared driving with her because she'd go and then she'd lift her foot off, and then she'd go and she'd lift her foot off. And it was kind of scary.
No. So we don't have to. This is totally up to you guys. Do you want to talk about Laurel?
I'm fine talking about Laurel.
Oh, might make me cry.
She can talk about it.
It's totally up to you. But I'm sure like Derek and Kendra and some of them would like to know more about her because they never got to meet her. So what were your kids like when they were little?
My kids,
Yeah.
they were fun.
I was ornery. I was ornery.
Were you the boss
You
of
were
the house?
ornery. No, you
I've
weren't.
always been told I was the stubborn one, still am.
Yeah. So how was your sibling dynamic as kids?
Good. I was only 2.5 years younger than Laurel, so she was kind of forced to take me with her everywhere she went. So growing up, sometimes her friends would get annoyed that I was around, but then as we grew older, I was finally accepted as like one of their friends, but I was always kind of the tag along.
They didn't like you being there?
Sometimes when I was little.
So was there a bigger gap between you and your brother then?
8 years. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's 8 years between Tyler and I, and
I guess I never realized how big a gap that was.
10.5, 11 years between him and Laurel. You know, Laurel and I were friends. Her and my husband Ray were in the same class, and they were like brother and sister. You know, like how it is when you don't date the people in your class. But they loved music, and they could talk for hours about who sang what, and I like music, but I never got into who sings what. Like I couldn't name who sang what song or whatever, and they could do that for hours. So that was kind of their passion. And the thing about Laurel that since my kids didn't get to know her and Tyler's kids didn't get to know her, we see qualities in Kendra and Berkeley that remind us of Laurel. Same with Shannon Hillman. Like there's parts of Laurel in all of them that we can see, and so that's really cool that it carries on through generations. So
Yeah.
I know. I was living with Laurel at the time of her accident, and it was kind of confusing because Mom called the house at 6 in the morning, and before cell phones, I had to get up and go answer the house phone, and she asked me if Laurel was home. And I'm like, well, I don't know. And she goes, well, can you go look? So I went and looked in her room, and she wasn't there. And she said, well, does it look like she slept in her bed? And I said, I don't know. She never makes her bed. It's like, it's hard to tell. And then she tells me, well, she died in a car wreck last night. And I said, what? And she goes, well, do you want to come over? She lived here at the time, and Laurel and I lived where Gary Hillman lives now. And I'm just like, no, I don't want to come over. I'm like, what is she talking about? You know? And so then... And she was in shock. Russ Copenhaver had been here. He was a deputy at the time, and he had been here to notify. And my dad was out driving around because Laurel had his pickup, so he was out looking for her because he needed it to go to work. And anyway, so she was in shock when she told me. Then I'm in shock because she just confused me, you know. So I had to think about it for a while, and then I came over. And when I came over, your grandma Sharon was sitting at the kitchen table, and they were both crying, and so then it sunk in, and I don't like to cry in front of people, so I went straight back to the bathroom, bawled my eyes out, came back out, and at this point in my life, I was 19, Laurel was 21. This point in my life, I'd been through enough deaths in the family that I just went to work. I'm like, okay, we got to get a tablet out, you know, people are going to start showing up, bringing things, we got to write it down, so we have thank you note, you know, so I just kind of went to business mode. Your Grandpa Mick had taken Tyler early that morning because he had a lamb to put in the fair. And so he had picked Tyler up before they knew anything happened. And they were going down Buggy Creek Hill. Tyler noticed my dad's pickup, knew Laurel had it, and kept asking Mick, are we going to go check on her? Are we going to go to the hospital? Sorry, that's my phone. Anyway, to be continued.
So what were the businesses in town?
What?
What all businesses were in town? Did we still have grocery stores?
Here?
Yeah.
Yeah. We had 2 grocery stores. We had Gasper's grocery store and Claypool's grocery store. I worked at Claypool's grocery store.
Was that in the main floor of the Masonic Lodge at that point?
Yeah. And then they sold it to Jim Gamble, and I continued working for him. And then, for some reason, the bank thought I needed to work at the bank, and which I didn't really want to do because I didn't know how to do it, but I did it.
And it was still the local Hinsdale bank at that time, right?
Right, it was owned by, well, Lawrence Boucher that worked there, which, I worked at the store, it was owned by Claypool's, and then they sold it to Gamble, so I worked for him for a couple of years. But I think he decided he didn't want to own it anymore too, and I think it just closed. So that's when I went to work at the bank.
What kind of things were in grocery stores at that point? Was it mostly, shelf-stable dry goods like flowers and cans and stuff? Was there a lot of fresh produce?
Oh yeah, we had one whole place that was just lettuce and all that kind of stuff. It was a cooler type thing. It was right up front, right across from the checkout stand. And then there was a basement where we kept a bunch of stuff. And then they also had a area for pharmacy type stuff.
Oh, okay.
Drugs and toothpaste and aspirin and all that kind of stuff. I did a lot of going down, up and down the stairs, because when we got a truckload of groceries, we'd take it to the basement.
Did they have a little elevator or like dumbwaiter system there? Okay.
No, I had to carry it up by hand, generally. Yeah.
Were there a lot of people that bought most of their food at that time, or were there still a lot of gardens and people providing most of their own eggs and milk at home?
They did do that. They did. Everybody had chickens. We had chickens, but at that time I didn't. I was living in town by that time, but and then after I worked there for a few years, I got fired. When Lawrence Boucher asked me to, he's a women's softball person, they wanted our team to serve breakfast for Milk River Days, and none of the girls would do it. So I thought, I can do it, I'll do it. So I bought all the stuff with my own money. I bought maple sticks, donuts, made coffee, gave them juice, and Terry Ellsworth actually cooked some scrambled eggs. So she and I served breakfast for him. Well, we of course charged him a little fee for it. So when I got all done, I put the money into the Hinsdale Women's Softball account that we had at the bank. Well, Doodad would, every night after he got off work, he'd go to the bar, and he wouldn't come home till like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And every time he went there, he would write a counter check for like $25. Well, one day the lady that owned the bar brought it all in, and I added it up, and it was like $800 and some worth of $25 checks. He didn't have that much money in his account. It was $25 short. So I took the $25 out of the Hinsdale Women's Softball and put it in our account. Well, one of the girls at the bank told the directors. So they had a special meeting one day, and they called me back to it. So I said, well, it was my own money. I spent it. I took the $25 out because I was going to be overdrawn, but it was my own money. I made that money all by myself.
And even if you had just been, you'd already funded the initial bit, you'd probably put $25 into the donuts and everything that you bought.
Right. I spent more than that on the stuff I bought. So anyway, I went home from work that night, and pretty soon I had a knock on the door, and it was Lawrence telling me that they decided to fire me. So I'm thinking, I didn't do anything wrong. Why would they fire me? So I decided, okay, I'm going to sue him for wrongful discharge, which I did. Nobody in Glasgow would take my case because they were all buddies of the First Community Bank, and they did a lot of work with First Community Bank. So I know Malta had got a lawyer from Malta that would take my case, and I won $30,000.
That's probably quite a chunk back then.
Yeah, it was, and I was kind of on my own by then. So, I went to the deposition. Lawrence, the lawyers did, and I was working at United Insurance, and so I went over there during this deposition, and every question they asked him, he said, I don't recall. I don't recall. That's all he would say is, I don't recall. So after that was all over and said and done, they said, okay, you won.
So when you were at the bank, were you working with your father-in-law there as well? Did Bud work at the bank?
Bud owned the bank.
Owned the bank.
Then
Okay.
he sold the bank. And
Gotcha.
ended up, I don't know if Lawrence bought the bank, or why was Lawrence there? Lawrence came from a long ways away. And the whole family moved here. And Lawrence became the president of the bank.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but he asked, Lawrence begged me to work at the bank also, you know. So I said, okay, if I've never worked at a bank before, but I'll do it. And I did it for several years. And then all of a sudden, I was done.
So, do you remember the train ever actually stopping in town?
The train?
Yeah.
Yeah, it did, because I used to ride it back and forth. When I was going to college, I would hop on the train and come home.
Yeah. How was that?
It was fun. It was okay.
Was it a little different than the trains going by today?
Probably, it was older. Yeah, it was just an old train.
Do you remember the old depot when it was there?
Mm-hmm.
Was it basically just a spot for people to get on and off train and then to move
Right.
packages and stuff on or off?
Yeah, it wasn't very big at all, and it wasn't nice. It was just an old building. Is it gone now?
Yep. Yep. Do you remember when there was more across the tracks, or do you just remember the elevator that they're taking down now? Because I believe there used to be another elevator, and at one point I believe there was even a little stockyards there from back when they used to load cattle on the train.
Yeah, probably. I remember that. Yeah. And then, of course, the airports are over there.
Yep. What other businesses that were in town? Was the co-op still going?
But the co-op.
Oh, I assume that's what was running the elevator when people would sell their grain in town.
Oh, I don't know. I think it was.
We were talking about her getting fired at the bank.
Didn't take that up.
Yeah. Yeah. So what were some of your fun memories of raising your children? When did they play well together or surprise you or get into something you didn't think they could?
Oh, they'd pick on each other. I remember they'd really pick on Tyler when he was little. Laurel would sit on top of him and poke him in the chest.
No, that was me.
Was that you
Yeah.
that did that?
He'll tell the story that I would sit on top of him through the whole Johnny Carson show and play Chinese checkers on his chest.
Isn't that what little brothers are
Yeah.
for?
I'm the one that always got stuck babysitting him because I was the middle child.
Yeah. So did they get to do some of the things in their childhood that you didn't get to? Did they get to do 4-H and sports and band and choir and all those fun
They
music
did. I
activities?
never did any of that stuff. Yeah, they did. Laurel, you played basketball, didn't you?
Hmm. We didn't have volleyball at the time.
That's
No,
it.
but you played basketball. Both you and Laurel.
And Laurel and I didn't do 4-H, but that was by choice. Tyler did.
Yeah, that seems to be a little polarizing at certain times.
Did you do it?
Yep, we did 4-H. I didn't have choices in most of these things.
Well, and that's when Tyler had his lamb for fair. They lived here in this house, and he had a little pin out here
Oh, we had it in
behind,
town.
like where our garage is now. Yeah, we had it out there to take care of. So when you're a town kid, you just got to find other ways.
Yeah.
That's what he was doing the morning that Laurel had her accident. They were taking the Mick stopped with Russell, and they picked up Tyler and his lamb. They were taking it to the fair. And of course, they came upon the accident, and right away,
Yeah.
Tyler knew it was Laurel.
Yeah, sorry, that's where I cut off when my phone rang. It was my grandkids, so I had to answer it.
No, you're good. We just transitioned and talked about other things.
Okay. But I was in the middle of Tyler knew that was Dad's pickup and kept wanting Uncle Mick to take him to the hospital, and Mick kept like he hadn't been notified, but he knew. Mick could tell because they met the hearse. And so he just took Tyler to the fair, convinced him he needed to take care of his lamb. And in the meantime, Sharon jumped in her car and headed to Glasgow to pick Tyler up and then brought him back.
Who did?
Sharon.
Oh, did she?
Mm-hmm.
I know when he walked in the house, he wouldn't talk to anybody.
He came in crying because Sharon let him know right before they got here what was going on. So he was 11 at the time Tyler was.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone grew up a little different with all these events going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was it? What was the feeling like when you became a grandmother?
Feeling like I was really old.
You were a young grandma.
I was a young grandma. How old was I when you?
Let me see. Ray would have been. You would have been probably 48, 49
Maybe. I was in my 40s
when
probably.
Derek was born.
Because what? Derek's 4
Derek-
years older than us, so 80. Is he an 89 baby?
No, he's a 90.
90. Okay. I can never quite tell. It's like it depends on what month you land
He was
on.
born in
October.
90?
Yeah, October.
So how much is 90 minus 45?
45. So you're
Yeah.
45.
Oh, I was 45.
There's some people still having kids at that age.
Yeah.
So did you do much babysitting of Derek and Kendra when they were little?
I think I did.
Yeah, she worked full time, but she did do weekends or stuff like that if we wanted to go out or do something. But yeah, they spent a lot of time with her.
Mhm.
How was that being a working grandmother?
A working grandmother. It was okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always had to work. I had need to make money, but I would spend any amount of time I could with my grandkids.
We stopped in her office a lot when they were little and have a diaper change, or they'd lay on her desk or play at her desk. So
Yeah.
they got
When I worked at United Insurance, I would go get
Kendra.
Kendra from preschool, didn't I?
Yep, for your lunch hour, because I had a part-time job, and it went until 2 in the afternoon. And so Kendra got done with preschool at noon. She'd pick her up for her hour lunch, take her home for an hour, drop her off at daycare for an hour, and then I'd go pick her up.
So did Kendra start preschool in Glasgow then?
She went to First Lutheran Preschool in Glasgow.
Okay.
When
So I was sitting here going, I was
3.
like, Kendra started kindergarten with us.
She was when she was 3 and 4. She went to preschool in Glasgow.
Gotcha. Okay. 'Cause I knew Claire, I don't think, got to start kindergarten with us, but was there right afterward. And I was just surprised you started talking about like, no, she was there just right before that then.
Yeah.
So did Derek start school in Glasgow then?
No, they all started school. They
Okay.
started school here.
Okay. Gotcha. Just a very young preschool.
Yeah, they just both went to the First Lutheran Preschool. They start when they're 3 and
Thank you.
4.
How old was she when she went to preschool?
3 and 4, they do 2 different classes, so she did both, and so did Derek.
Gotcha. Well, he eventually played football there and became a Scotty, but he was almost one a lot earlier, huh? So how were holidays different, you know? You talked about during your childhood, you just kind of had them at the ranch with your immediate family.
Mm-hmm.
But then you had, holidays when you had kids, and then eventually when you have grandkids, how have holidays changed?
It was more fun.
We've always had lots around. Like we used to, when Grandma Betty and Grandpa Magnus moved to town and lived over at that house that they built.
Mm-hmm.
You know what house I'm talking about? We used to all go there. Your mom and Grandma and Grandpa and us and everybody met there, and we'd have Christmas there. And then I think we did it here when they lived here too. And then eventually, after Grandma and Betty was gone, Mom took over having the holidays here. And then as we all grew and got married, I mean, we've all done it all different ways. We've been to your mom's house. We've even been to your Grandma Sharon's house. It was like we've been out to the ranch back in the day. And then eventually
I can't imagine everyone being in that ranch house. We only was in there once or twice before they took it down. That doesn't seem like a big enough house to have a full extended family.
I remember Easter's especially out there. I feel like
Used to what?
I remember having Easter out there especially because a lot of time mine and Heather's birthday would fall on Easter because we were only 4 days apart, and we'd kind of celebrate birthdays and Easters at the same time, but we'd all be out there, and that's back when Patty was still alive, and so we would all be there, all of us kids and our parents. And then as time grows and we all get married and have kids, it's like then you have extended families, and so you guys go to the Johnsons or the McCaulays or whatever. Or sometimes we try to do things together. We go to the Rummicks out to the Canen Ranch, or they used to come here because when I bought this house, then I became the one that had the holiday, and then as the Remick kids all moved back, now there's a lot of little kids, so now we go out there. So yeah, we still always have, it seems like, lots of family. That's one thing about it. I always feel sorry for people that don't have much family.
Was church a big part of the holidays?
Yeah, we always go Christmas Eve, especially to church, because we don't have a Christmas Day. But I can always remember, I think, going to church on Christmas Eve. For as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
For as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
We were over there yesterday setting some stuff up, and I had to remind everyone that this used to be a lot tighter before that addition.
Yeah.
Where is this at?
The Lutheran Church.
Oh.
Because that was at least 15, if not almost 20 years ago, we put that addition on now.
And when Ray and I got married in 88, we got married when it was in the small church. In December, we got married in there. And then when Kinder got married, had the addition on, so yeah, that was a lot nicer.
There's a lot more room. Makes the lutefisk feed a lot easier. I remember when there was a waiting list for lutefisk. Those people would come from all over. So, you mentioned Milk River Days before. Obviously, that started as the bicentennial, I believe. But did you guys celebrate the 4th of July? Was that still a big celebration before 76?
Before 76?
No.
Mm-mm. We never did the celebration at all for 4th of July in this town.
So it became a big celebration from then going forward when they did that bicentennial.
Right.
Gotcha. So what was that celebration like? Because I know that's changed a little bit. I know a lot more of it used to focus around the park.
Yeah. Well, we used to have stuff on the river, ski contests or something. I did never do it, but the other people did. I took pictures of it, but like water skiing and that type of thing. Jumping over on boards, they'd put a ramp type thing in there that you'd ski up and then fall in the water.
I didn't know you guys were doing that. You guys
didn't do it. That was like back.
They're a lot more adventurous than I am.
Yeah, I would never do it either.
I remember the slalom races.
The what?
I remember the ski races, the slalom races. That I don't know that I ever saw the jump. I just have heard about it because I think that was before my time.
Was hunting a big part of your family growing up at all?
No. Well, my dad would go deer hunting with his friends, but they'd go away and stay there and bring back the deer and hang them up on our clothesline, I think.
I can't imagine that made your mom very happy.
Well, they did just the metal part, the end part, not the closed lines, just the thing.
Just the pole.
Hold the clotheslines up. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you do any ice skating or sledding in the winter?
I did ice skating, and Hinsdale used to have ice skating rink up there. What used to be a Legion Hall. Do you remember the Legion Hall that used to be there?
The
kind of where the
old Majestic Theater right there on the corner of the school property.
And they had a big ice skating rink there, and Gordon McLaughlin was a big ice skater, and he used to beg me to come with him to go ice skating. So I do that quite a bit when I was in high school.
Yeah.
Just him and I.
Yeah, I believe that building's out at Boucher's now. I
Oh,
believe.
is it?
Yep,
they
I believe
moved
that's the shop there, right?
Mm.
The big wooden shop there is the
Okay.
old Majestic Theater, I believe they called that building.
Oh,
But
Probably.
the old Legion,
Mhm.
just depends on how far back you want to go. I had to argue with Dad on that. He's like, no, it's the old Legion. I'm like, that's what it was used for, but before that, that was the old Majestic Theater building.
I did not know that. The Majestic Theater.
Yep, I believe
Did
that
they show movies in there?
I think they might have. That was before sound.
Oh,
So did you ever? Was there ever a place in town that you guys would go eat, or was it usually Grandma and Grandpa were in town? If you needed food, you just went and grabbed lunch with Grandma Betty.
there was a restaurant uptown that Donna Christensen owned. It's called the Dewdrop Inn, and I worked there one summer.
Hmm.
Got $5 a day, I think.
Any ever have any big tippers?
Not really. I didn't get to keep the tips if I did get tips.
Oh, really?
No. Went to Donna.
What kind of things did they serve in the Dewdrop? What kind of food did you get?
Served all sorts of things, hamburgers or a meal, a real meal. Her husband is, at the time, is the one that started it. His name was, what was his name? I think his first name was Jerry. Can't remember for sure. But he's the one that brought her back here, and they opened that cafe, and so they would hire us high school girls to be the waitresses. Pay us $5 a day for our shift. Not worth it at all.
So were there 2 bars in town at that time?
Yeah. The Northern Bar and the Rainbow Bar.
What were the differences between them? Was one of them a little bit more upclass than the other?
The Rainbow Bar was always nicer because it's a brick building, and the Northern was just a wooden old. And the Northern Bar had an upstairs to it where people could rent rooms up there. But I don't know, I never was really up there to know what it even looked like, but I know
Gotcha.
that people could rent a room up there. But I don't think that's not there anymore, right? It's all gone.
Yep.
Yeah.
All new building.
Yeah.
So how has travel changed over your lifetime?
Travel?
Yeah, if you wanted to get to the next town over, or just wanted to, go for a drive, the vehicles, the roads, how has all that changed?
Well, the vehicles are a whole lot nicer now than they used to be. So, I didn't ever really do that as a kid, ever. Just whenever my mom and dad went someplace, I usually went with them, but we didn't go very many places. We just basically stayed on the farm.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, were there any other stories or anything, Stacie, that you wanted to talk about?
Not that I can think of.
There's no funny stories or anything you want to get on record? This is your time. Your brother's not here. You can dig up all of his old wrongdoings. The time he got into the cookie jar, let the dog go, put a hole in the carpet.
He just always got in trouble more.
Yeah, well, thank you, Cheryl. I really enjoyed this.
Huh?
I really enjoyed this. I've been wanting to do this for a while.
Okay. Well, I'm glad.
I wanted to know more about what it was like growing up there on the ranch. 'Cause
Yeah, it was. I would love to be there right now, but I'm not. But I'm getting too old to do that stuff anyway.
Yeah.
I don't think I could ride a horse anymore.
Yeah.
I might be able to, but
Yeah.
my dad got me into barrel racing when I was a kid, and then he said, "Okay, you need to get out here and practice this, So he set me some barrels up out behind the big red barn out there. And my horse was named Red. So I would go out there and practice. Well, I didn't put a saddle on the horse. And my horse one time was going around the barrel and something happened off to the side that scared him and he just went like this and I went flying the other way.
Yeah, barrel racing would be a very different sport if it was bareback.
Yeah. And so I went into the house kind of crying because I hurt, but my mom didn't take me to the doctor, but I think I broke my collarbone because I still got a bump right here. Yeah.
What was the old red barn like?
I had to paint that old red barn.
Oh, really?
Yeah. One summer, my dad wanted me to paint the house. Okay, so I painted the house. I get all done with that. He said, okay, go paint the garage that goes with it now. So I did that. Then he says, I think you should paint the barn. And you know how big that barn was. You saw it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I spent like the rest of the summer painting that barn. And then there was some granaries out along the edge of the... So he wanted me to paint those too, so I painted those. You know how much he paid me to do all that?
Nothing.
$40. Pretty much nothing. Yeah.
Oh, Brady, I was gonna ask, did she talk about her days as a softball player?
She did not.
What?
She talked a little bit about getting in trouble with the bank over it, but did not talk about actually playing on the team.
Yeah, she was our pitcher. So when I was a sophomore in high school, I actually was on the women's softball team. Lori Galt and I were, and we had a really good softball team. The track field over here used to be a decent softball field at one time or another too, and we used to host tournaments here. But we had a league, and Mom was the pitcher, Betty Porter was the catcher, and we had Gloria Klend, Linda Mogan, Dorothy Jensen. They all played infield, and I played outfield. Lori Galt played outfield. We had Anita Ryden was on the team at one time, wasn't she? Who all was we had?
Yeah, we had people from Whitewater. Sue Stahl played on the team.
Yeah. Oh, and Joe did too.
Huh?
But anyway, we were pretty good, and she was a really good pitcher. She did it was slow pitch back then, but she pitched underhanded, with a backspin.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so she was a good pitcher. But when I was a sophomore in high school, we made it to nationals in Oregon.
Oh,
So
wow.
we went to Portland for a softball tournament, but we didn't do very well there. We lost out in 2 games. But it was a fun experience to just get to
It was the end of our softball team too, wasn't it?
Yeah, we didn't do too much after that, but no, it was a lot of fun, and we had a pretty good team, and but that was before we didn't have high school softball back then. After that, we did start more of a high school league where Linda Mogan coached us, and we were all high school kids then, and we'd go play like the Glasgow teams, but my favorite memories are being on the women's softball team. It was a good time.
Well, that's cool. I know that way back, like in the 20s, there was a men's baseball teams that would travel. I didn't know that you guys had a...
Yeah, and it was a summertime
Yeah.
thing, because then...
I sure hate to do it in the winter.
Well, I mean, we couldn't do it too much into the fall because that's back when basketball for girls started in August. And so when we went to Oregon, our basketball had started, so we had to miss practice, I think, to go. But our basketball coach was Jim Peterson at the time, and his wife, Susan, was also on our team. So,
You had an in.
yeah, but no, that was fun. So being able to play softball with my mom and now get to see girls like Berkeley getting to play it as a high school sport and possibly college sports, and
Yeah.
it's kind of cool.
Kind of nice seeing the progression, isn't
Yeah.
it?
But they play fast pitch now.
It's a little faster.
Yeah.
So what was the favorite meal that your mother would cook growing up?
The favorite meal?
Mm-hmm.
Roast beef, mashed potatoes, gravy, corn on the cob. I hated squash. One time, my mother cooked squash for supper, and she squished it all up, like mashed potatoes, and it was squash. And I hated squash. I couldn't. So my dad made me take some squash, but I can't eat it, Dad. He said, you sit there and you eat every bite. So I did. Oh, I was just crying. I hated it so bad.
Mhm. Your dad had some pretty high expectations of you, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He needed a spanking.
So did you guys have a large garden growing up?
Oh yeah. Oh God, yeah. We had it. You know where the house was, and then out that way, that was all big garden.
Oh,
Yeah, and we had to hoe it, and plant it, and water it. And,
pick the potato bugs?
Yep. Had to do it all. I had to do it all. I don't think my brother had to do that stuff. But
I was kind of curious from the way you're talking. It sounds like your dad asked you to go for a lot of things over Mick.
yeah, he did. Yeah. And I don't know why. He trusted me to do them more than he did my brother, I guess. I don't know. He was silly.
So was all of that stored in a root cellar then?
Yeah, yeah. We took it all downstairs. We canned a lot of it, and there was shelves downstairs for all the cans. I think we canned the tomatoes but we put the potatoes in a big potato bin, and my mom had a deep freeze down there too. I think we froze like peas and beans, and she might have canned the beans. Not sure.
So I know the place is up there on top of the hill, but you're not far from the river. Did you guys ever go down to Laycock's or Simonson's or anyone down there and play on the river down off the edge of the ranch?
Us kids did and our parents let us go down there and spend the night. But it was like the water was only that deep. You could walk across it. It's like miles crossing.
Mm-hmm.
And so me and the Eaton boys and my brother would put tents up down there, and we'd spend the night. Once in a while, my mom would drive down and check on us to see if we were okay, but not very often.
Evidently felt that the country was pretty safe, huh?
Yeah.
Were there a lot of snakes and stuff around up there?
Snakes? Maybe garter snakes, but nothing like rattlesnakes.
They weren't worried about rattlesnakes coming and getting you or anything?
No. Nope.
Mm-hmm. What was your favorite childhood memory?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I have a lot, I guess. I guess my favorite part about being a child growing up in a small town is we were outside from sunup to sundown, just riding bikes, exploring. We had caves in the riverbank. We walked to the H a lot, did picnics. I mean, and basically you just came home and street lights were on. And I don't know, this was a lot less worry. I don't know, maybe. I don't know if it was for you, Mom, but compared to how kids grow up nowadays and all the technology nowadays. And but
you're connected to everything.
yeah, we just had a very simple life, I guess. I'm very thankful that Life 360 was not a thing when I was a kid.
Like what? What'd you say?
Life 360, where you can see where your kids are at all times. Or
She's glad she couldn't see. She's glad you couldn't see where she was at night.
or social media, you know, to see things you did as a kid come back to haunt you. So, but no, I just felt like we had a good life growing up. We just, like, it was simple, and we always found something to entertain ourselves outside. If it was wintertime, we snowmobiled, we sled, we ice skated. We used to have an old Yamaha snowmobile, and Laurel and Tyler and I would all go on it, and Tyler was just little, so he'd sit up front by the handlebars because he'd get the heat from the engine, and we'd go with Wayne and Lance Johnson, and we'd go over here, out in the fields over here, and we'd snowmobile all day long.
You took Tyler with you when?
Yep.
Brr.
You let us.
I can't believe I did.
But I also, I enjoyed going out to the Swanson Ranch and riding horses with Heather and Heidi, and we'd also go on picnics horseback. But I always, when I was little, I always wanted to spend the night, and I'd always get homesick in the middle of the night.
You would?
Yeah, and your Grandpa Mick one night, I'll never forget it. It was when they lived in the White House. and we were upstairs, and he came up and got me, and I had a little brown leather suitcase, and it was middle of the night, and I was crying because I wanted to go home, and he took me downstairs, took me outside, pointed to the way to town, and he said, if you want to go home, it's that way.
You did? Did you start walking?
No. I went back in and tried to go back to sleep, but he scared me to death, but I'll never forget that.
Yeah, I never knew that.
But I always wanted to spend the night, even though they always knew I probably wasn't going to make it.
You're not the only kid that did that. So, after Mick passed and they moved to town, did it make it harder to go visit the ranch?
Oh, honestly, by that time, I probably already hadn't been to the ranch very often, and then, probably hardly ever went after that. I think I went to a couple brandings after Jeff bought it, but it just wasn't the same. And especially after the barn was gone and different barn was put up, it just, wasn't the same. But
After the barn burned down?
well, didn't they tear it down too?
I think it burned.
Oh, I thought,
That was my understanding.
anyway, it's just, that was a cool old barn, but.
Yeah, it's probably why my mother is still fascinated by barns. Well, that plus Simonson's, because I believe Simonson's, when they were building the house for a while, lived in their barn, and that's still my mom's goal at some point is to live in a barn.
Really?
Barn dominium or just
Yeah,
a barn?
a barn, just a straight barn. I'm still waiting for her to move into the loft of her sheep barn. I 100% expect her to do that at some point.
Yeah, she spends a lot of time out at that sheep
Yeah,
barn.
she has a fascination with barns and just, that big structure that's safe and out of the wind and, the straw and the feed and the animals. It's different.
I think another, back to childhood memory, favorite part of my childhood is growing up on the Milk River, and we spent a lot of time on there as kids, and our dad bought a couple different boats, and my kids got to experience the last boat that my dad bought, because it ended up being mine and Tyler's eventually, and then mine and Ray's, and it taught a lot of kids in this town how to ski, how to kneeboard, and so I think just the Mighty Milk, will always be a big part of our entire lives, including my kids. They spent a lot of time on there too, and so did you guys. So,
Well, it's amazing from the ranch to hear how different this river is.
And how it keeps changing.
Yeah. Hopefully it doesn't eat your house.
Yeah.
This house has been here long enough. You should be good, but you never know.
But yeah, and I just remember as a high school kid, we had friends that had never been on the river. They'd been on Nelson Lake or Fort Peck Lake, and how many people didn't even realize that we had this behind town, behind their backyard. People just didn't realize that you could boat on it. And I remember trying to convince people, you should come to the river, because when the wind blows, you can go around the corner and it's smooth, so you don't get blown off. And then as I got older and more people started finding out about the river, and there's some times when it does get kind of crowded. But
It's a good problem to have.
Yeah, I remember kind of thinking, maybe we should not be advertising this. We should keep this our little secret.
But I always remember, kids, Saco that way, Phillips County kids, they said the lake, they meant Nelson. And anyone, east of Hinsdale said the lake, they meant Fort Peck. And I had the same thought of, why do you want to go out there?
I love the lake too now, and now I love the lake.
But it's usually choppy and wavy, and if you fall off or break down, it's a long ways back to shore. And for how horrendous the mosquitoes are around here, they're never an issue when you're in the middle of the river.
Right.
And it's big enough that you can turn around with a skier or a tube or whatever, and it's like, and
But
it's
the one thing
always
you have
smooth.
to tell the people that grew up on a lake is when you turn around, you got to get in the wake. We've run a few people into the cattails before.
Well, that's half the fun. How else are you going to get them off?
Yeah.
That's the game.
But no, I enjoy the lake too. Obviously, we spend our summers out there now, but yeah, the Mighty Milk will always have a big piece of my heart, and I think my kids' heart. And